This time on Landmarks, it surfs up on the amazing Amazon River. We visit the mysterious Easter Island. Mingle with tourists in the hub of Bhutan. And walk along the ancient Hadrian's Wall. But first, as far as landmarks go, this is one of the most recognisable bridges in the world. Tower Bridge crosses the River Thames in London, close to the Tower of London, from where it takes its name. It is a combination bascule and suspension bridge. Once London Bridge was the only bridge across the Thames, but as London grew, more bridges were built to the west. The area east of the bridge developed into a busy port. During the 19th century, East London became densely populated. Crossing the river meant a long journey west, and congestion mounted on these western bridges. Public pressure escalated for a bridge to be built east of the London Bridge. London Corporation formed a special committee to oversee the construction of a bridge that would not interfere with the river traffic. The bridge design was open to a public competition. They received over 50 designs. The evaluation of the designs was surrounded by controversy. And 8 years later, in 1884, city architect Horace Jones, in collaboration with John Wolfe Barry, put forward a design for Tower Bridge that was acceptable to all. Horace Jones just happened to be one of the judges. The design called for a bascule bridge 244 metres in length, with two towers each 65 metres high, built on piers. The central span of 61 metres between the towers was split into two equal bascules or leaves, which could be raised to allow river traffic to pass. The bascules weighed over 1,000 tonnes each and were counterbalanced to minimise the force required to raise them. 2 years later, work finally began on the bridge. It took 5 major contractors and the relentless labour of over 432 workers 8 years to finish the bridge, which was finally completed in 1894. 2 massive piers containing over 70,000 tonnes of concrete were sunk into the riverbed. 11,000 tonnes of steel went into the framework of the towers and walkways. Cornish granite and Portland stone covered the frame. The total cost was £1,184,000. When complete, Tower Bridge was the largest and most sophisticated bascule bridge ever built. Using steam to power the enormous pumping engines, hydraulic rams lifted the 2 sections of bridge to allow river traffic to pass. The energy created was stored in 6 massive accumulators so that as soon as power was required to lift the bridge, it was readily available. Despite the weight and complexity of the system, the bascules only took about 1 minute to raise to their maximum angle of 86 degrees. The bridge was officially opened on the 30th of June 1894 by the Prince of Wales, the future King Edward VII and his wife Alexandra of Denmark. In 1910, the high-level walkways, which were designed so that the public could still cross the bridge when it was raised, were closed down due to lack of use. Most people preferred to wait at the bottom and watch the bascules rise up. In 1976, the engines were upgraded, the steam engines replaced with oil and electric motors. The bascules are still operated by hydraulic power. Through the unusual design, the bridge has seen some interesting incidents during its history. One pilot, Frank McLean, had to fly between the bascules and the high-level walkways in his short biplane to avoid crashing during an emergency. A London bus had to leap from one bascule to the other when the bridge began to rise with the bus still on it. In May 1997, the motorcade of US President Bill Clinton was divided by the unexpected opening of the bridge. The bridge split the motorcade in two, much to the consternation of security staff. A spokesman for Tower Bridge is quoted as saying, "We tried to contact the American Embassy, but they wouldn't answer the phone." Tower Bridge is sometimes mistakenly referred to as London Bridge. A popular urban legend is that in April 1968, American entrepreneur Robert P. McCulloch of McCulloch Oil spent almost $2.5 million purchasing London Bridge. He believed mistakenly that he was buying Tower Bridge, but pilot denied this. He removed London Bridge and reassembled it at Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Coming up, the amazing Amazon. This next landmark is certainly one of the greatest rivers in the world, if not the greatest, and depending on whom you ask, rivals the Nile as being the longest river in the world. It is the Amazon River. South America's Amazon River is undoubtedly the biggest river, owing to the amount of fresh water it carries to the oceans. 1/5 of the world's river flow can be attributed to the Amazon. The Amazon is so large that it has its own currents and tides, including a unique giant wave. The Amazon's giant wave, known as a pororoca, is a unique phenomenon that attracts surfers throughout the world. Recently, a 20-year-old Brazilian from the northeast state of Ceará set a new world record during the country's river surfing championship. Adilton Mariano surfed for 34 minutes and 8 seconds on a wave that was 5 metres high and lasted for some 40 minutes with a speed close to 20 kilometres an hour. The previous record, also set by Mariano, was 26 minutes and 19 seconds. The river surfing event begins on the Araguari River in the city of Macapa, located 2,000 kilometres north of Brasilia. It differs from ocean waves in that it has two currents pushing across each other. As a result, the wave exhibits great strength and duration and repeats itself every 12 hours. I had a moment when I almost disappeared into the wave. I recovered and thank God I was able to overcome my limitations and take maximum advantage of the wave. At its widest point during the dry season, the Amazon River can be 11 kilometres wide. But when the river floods during the rainy season, it can be up to 45 kilometres wide. The mouth of the Amazon is more than 400 kilometres wide, longer than the River Thames in London. At no point does a bridge cross the Amazon. The river is home to a diverse range of wildlife, including the Amazon River dolphin, the anaconda, and the carnivorous piranha. With seriously dangerous inhabitants like these, why would one choose to swim these waters? Slovenian Martin Strel claimed a world record as he completed his 2-month swim down the Amazon River, becoming the first person to swim the entire length. The Fishman swam a total of 5,268 kilometres, battling piranhas, crocodiles and hot sun to break his 4th record. Early in the attempt, Strel had to be hauled from the water by his son Borut and others and had difficulty standing. His doctor ordered him not to swim, but Strel, obsessed with reaching Belém, insisted on swimming the final few miles at night to avoid the blistering sun. Nicknamed Fishman, Strel started his latest big river swim at the Peruvian jungle town of Atalaya, where buckets of animal blood had to be poured into the river to distract piranha from making a quick meal of the swimmer. Strel had officially set a Guinness Book of World Records mark when he hit the 3,274-mile point and formally finished his marathon swim down the Amazon 4 days ahead of schedule. In the last leg of his journey, Strel said the ocean tides coming upriver were driving him backwards at times. The team was constantly at risk of parasites and disease such as malaria and yellow fever. Along the trip, Strel and his team had several near misses with pirate attacks and often had to steer towards swift-flowing currents to avoid being set upon by piranha. This resulted in Strel being swept away in a giant whirlpool once and separated from his team and boat another time. Hundreds of people were on hand in the Brazilian colonial city of Belém as an exhausted Strel, 52, made his final stroke and was pulled from the water, who was then rushed to hospital suffering high blood pressure and dizziness. Fantastic. He's a hero, an example. This is a great incentive for sports. for its social aspect. So I think it's brilliant who supports such a sport. Good morning, Belém. Thank you, Belém. After arriving in Belém, Strel was placed in an ambulance and medics worked to stabilise his blood pressure, which was at near heart attack levels. It was the most challenging of Strel's big river swims. He has previously swum the Yangtze in China, the Mississippi in the United States, and the Danube in Europe. The Amazon is truly a magnificent and unique river by anyone's account. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as it is known today, is one of the world's most remote inhabited islands. It is famous for its large stone statues, the moai. But while their stony gaze never shifts, life for the island's real-life residents is far from inspired, and now they are telling the Chilean government they have had enough. There are deep problems that have not been resolved since 1888. Cultural problems that represent themselves as problems in daily life. Problems like education, health, employment, infrastructure, conservation. The general sentiment is that Easter Island has a distinctly Polynesian feel, far different from the Latin American mainland to which it is tied. Nobody is asking for independence, they say. They just want the island to be its own province and the people able to elect their own governor. We worry some about the government because we are so far away. We are more involved in tourism here, and if the government provided some incentives, that would be good. In 2006, President Michelle Bachelet approved the construction of a new public hospital and promised to give Easter Island more autonomy. While mainland Chile booms on copper exports as Latin America's economic star, life on the island is no beach holiday. Why did the government build a nice hospital? They do renovations, but there aren't any good doctors. We don't need a nice hospital, we need good personnel. Most islanders are aware they must retain economic links with Chile in order to survive, but are hoping to pass a bill which will mean greater choice and more resources to keep their unique island alive. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, is not just some distant place far from the continent. It is also the entrance door to Chile. With its beauty, with its culture, with its identity that captures everyone's attention, it makes it so that everyone wants to come and see its wonders, its culture, and its dances, amongst many other things. One way to preserve their unique culture is to effect the return of their moai statues. The purpose of the moai remains a mystery, but some scientists believe that they may have served a religious purpose. Carved by hand, out of the soft volcanic tuff by Polynesian colonisers as early as the 11th century, the moai seem to stand grimly on guard over their island home, dotted around the coastline. Many can be found in museums and collections around the world. Efforts are being made to collect and return them all home. One such statue was recently handed back. Dozens of Chileans attended a reception at the Recoleta Cultural Centre in Buenos Aires to examine the 2-metre monolithic statue. Chilean artist Rosa Velasco, who owns the statue, joined forces with Chilean government officials, businessmen and members of the Easter Island indigenous community to work through the legal process to send the work back to its origin. It's an artistic act because I'm a visual artist and the moai is mine. I'm returning it even though I could also have sold it. But I think that at this moment in the history of man, art has the obligation of putting aesthetic values before the value of money. The sculpture will be taken back to Easter Island, where Indigenous islanders will welcome the statue home with a traditional ceremony. The ancient Easter Island statue will have finally returned to its homeland after 86 years. What happens is that for native people like us, ethnic people who live and believe in cultural traditions, this kind of thing makes us emotional because it's part of our daily life. In such remote places where globalization doesn't exist, we're very far from that. The daily things that unite us with our ancestors are the most important things. Coming up, Bhutan. This is Bhutan. It has all the elements of Shangri-La: misty mountains, mysterious monasteries, emerald green paddy fields, and tales of yaks and yetis. After years of control, the number of foreign tourists visiting Bhutan's spectacular conifer and rhododendron forests and hilltops adorned with fluttering Buddhist prayer flags is increasing. The Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan has been selling itself as high-value, low-volume tourist destination, consciously excluding the backpackers who roam neighbouring India and Nepal by insisting visitors spend at least $200 per person per day during the peak season. Hollywood stars like Uma Thurman and Cameron Diaz are reported to frequent Bhutan's boutique hotels, but it's mostly groups of elderly Americans or nature lovers who visit the country. Now the government of the remote Himalayan kingdom says it plans to increase the number of tourists to 27,000 in the next 4 years, but again the focus is on the high end. Bhutan is off limits to mountaineers. Its people believe the peaks are abodes of the gods and boast the world's highest unclimbed mountain, the 7,570-metre Gangkar Puensum. Most tourists head for the monasteries and fortresses, which dominate every district and host exotic religious festivals, where monks and laymen swirl in ritual dance in events that last several days in spring and autumn. Not many complain of the high costs. The experience is much more than what they pay for, although food quality is always at the top of the list of complaints by tourists. One visitor loved the place so much on her last stay that she decided to revisit this year.
The people are wonderful, and just, you can feel the spirituality everywhere, and the landscape is as beautiful and untouched as anywhere I've ever been.
I think it's beyond money in that what you gain from just being here and experiencing all the people, you can't put a price on that.
Bhutan says it learnt many lessons from the way Nepal threw open its doors to tourists in the 1950s and became a destination on the hippie trail. It is avoiding backpackers and wooing the rich who can contribute something to its economy.
We don't want backpackers because, given the absorptive capacity of the country with infrastructure problems with that, which is now slowly, disappearing. But in the past, we did not want to have these, hordes of, so-called backpackers who compete on spending less rather than leaving behind something, So they leave behind only their, the waste and their rubbish and hardly anything to the economy.
These days, the price does not put off as many people as it did when visitors were first allowed in 1974. Especially when hotels, food, transport and a guide are included.
Insofar as every journey that the guest comes to experience in Bhutan is unique to them. We very much try and customize their tour, their experiences, their expectations. We like to be able to say that our guests have something very unique when they come back.
But Bhutan is slowly modernising and opening up to the outside world. The first car arrived in 1961. Television was finally allowed in 1999, and Shakira now dominates the discos of the capital, Thimphu. For the first time in centuries, it is now possible to walk the 84-mile Roman trail across Hadrian's Wall in northeast England. The £6 million project to boost tourism and the local economy now allows visitors to the historic site to walk coast to coast from Bowness-on-Solway to Newcastle. Hadrian's Wall is one of England's most stunning and memorable monuments. It was built in AD 122 to separate the Romans from the barbarians. The World Heritage Site takes in some of the most rugged moorland and runs through some of the most beautiful parts of England. Hadrian, or Hadrianus, was Emperor of Rome between 117 and 138 AD. His reign was most notable for the lack of military conflicts. Hadrian chose to avoid conflicts at the edges of the great Roman Empire and instead erected permanent fortifications along the borders. The most famous of these is in Britain.
We've established the link across the country for the first time since AD 411. To do that, we've had to build bridges. We've built 14 steel bridges, built incidentally out of the same steel as the Angel of the North. We've installed 200 plus signposts, 200 plus gates and stiles. We've worked with archaeologists, we've worked with historians and people concerned with nature conservation. Our aim has been to build a sustainable path that takes into account all of these factors.
To mark the reopening of the wall, a reenactment took place with a legion of Roman centurions on hand to repel the enemy. The wall and its many fortifications and foundations was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987. It is the most visited tourist site in North England and is described as the most important monument built by the Romans in Britain. The £6 million investment to open up the trail includes new paths and bridges over rivers, which have been split up into 40 short walks. The aim is to encourage 20,000 new tourists to the area, boost the local economy and the English countryside.
As people come and enjoy the assets of something like the Hadrian's Wall Trail, that contribute to the rural economies, the rural people, the rural communities on the way. So we can actually do both of the things that we set out to do, to improve the quality of life for people in the countryside and improve the quality of the countryside for everyone to enjoy it.
Hadrian's Wall is 117 kilometres long. Its width and height was dependent on the construction materials available nearby. Made from squared stone, it was 3 metres wide and 5 to 6 metres tall. Some sections were made from turf and measured 6 metres wide and 3.5 metres high. This does not include the wall's ditches and forts. Some parts of the central section of the wall survive to a height of 10 feet. The trail is already attracting an international following.
I decided to walk to Hadrian's Wall National Park because I like the old Roman history that's part of England, and nature that I hope will be forever here. And also I'm interested in the Industrial Revolution, which is part of this part of England also. And of course the English pubs.
Opening up Hadrian's Wall Trail is part of the ongoing efforts by Britain's Countryside Agency to allow people to enjoy the natural beauty of the UK and take in some of the glorious historic sites in the north of England.